Hello, Zlatko. Zdravo, Zlatko. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to speak in front of your public. How should I present myself? I'm a cultural studies scholar, professor of cultural studies from the University of Ljubljana. I'm mostly interested in what is happening here and now. So the cultural and ideological aspect of post-socialist transition.
So one of these two things you mentioned, I already know it's a phenomenon of jugonostalgia. And among other things, you have written a monograph on what you have called titostalgia. Can you tell us shortly about that? What is titostalgia, and what does it tell us about the post-socialist Yugoslav societies?
Many things. It's kind of symptom of the whole ideological transformation in the last 30 and something years. So post-socialist nostalgia and titostalgia is one part of it. First of all, I would like to clarify that it is not some East European or Balkan peculiarity. It's not something specific for the region. It has its specific features, but it's not, as in many times, it happens only East Europeans, because of their troubled past. They are referring to old times. No, it's one of global phenomena from the modern times on. What is the essence of nostalgia? More changes, more nostalgia, because there's increasingly changes are going on so fast that there's many things to remember, to be nostalgic for. So what is the specificity of the post-socialist nostalgia? Comparing to other nostalgias, maybe in the Western world, there's a big difference, because in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this political break, political rupture, So it adds, to the usual cultural, pop cultural nostalgia, also this element of the radical political break. So from 180 degrees, things changed. So what is the essence of post-socialist nostalgia? First, it's to understand nostalgia, this is another paradox of researching nostalgia. It's more important to understand what is going wrong today than what was good back then. It's nostalgia is always the story. It's not how it really was. It's how we wish that it was back then. So it's kind of logical answers to problems, mistakes, and delusions of the post-socialist nostalgia. And now we come to Tito. Why this, why is Tito back? Why he lives on, as it is in in many songs from his times. First of all, I would say that generally speaking, no one expected that nostalgia for socialist time would appear back 30 years ago. In the revolutionary furor, there is no place for memories, for the old, or for nostalgia. So it's something that is unexpected. No one expected 30 years ago. So why Tito? Because in a way, he personalized the whole idea of the anti-fascist resistance in the Second World War and the socialist Yugoslavia as such. So this 45 years from 1945 to 1990. So in a way, he is the main symbol of it. We can discuss about his historical role and all the controversies, but in nostalgia, he appears as a good guy, as the one that in a way established Yugoslavia. I have much more, it's a much more complex personality, and my view is much more complex, but we are speaking about this nostalgic image of Tito. So on one side, it's very ontological, it's nostalgia of the older people, not all, but many of them, and the public opinion surveys shows that it's got quite some of his fans. So it's kind of, for older people, it's ontological, it's for Tito. It's a part of the personal or collective memory of older generation. But the other nostalgia for Tito is much more interesting for me. It's not for Tito, but it's against the present day condition. So it's a strategy how to criticize, provoke the mainstream, and how to show alternative. So before we were speaking about this neo-nostalgia, it's a counter discourse. It does not come from within, but it's more relational, So the using Tito and other so-called problematic images from the past, we explicitly or implicitly criticize present-day leaders, political system, political orientations, economic conditions, social injustices, and so on. So there's so much. I'm mostly interested in this one. There's so much of Tito or references to Yugoslavia appearing in popular culture, not only alternative one, in music, graffiti, internet. There's so much of digital nostalgia, and who made this digital nostalgia? Not old comrades, from in their 60s and 70s and so on. but kids, young people, who have completely different view on everything that I said about Yugoslavia and Tito, but they include them into their strategies of criticizing what is going on today. So increasingly also in the consumer culture. So I would like to finish now, which are the main elements of this nostalgia for Tito. First, anti-fascism, anti-ethnic nationalism, then anti-imperialism. Yugoslavia was non-aligned country, non-aligned state, so it did not side with any of the two political blocs. Social justice, multiculturalism. So brotherhood and unity was not something that was imposed bottom-up by the Yugoslav communists, but it was on one side it was official policy, but on the other side it became it was a practice, bottom-up, from the people who different nations or ethnicities from different religious backgrounds who lived there. And this multiculturalism was mostly, bottom up, and extremely important also in the post-socialist condition, where the true prevailing ideologies and political practices are overwhelming, and this is ethno-nationalism on one side and neoliberalism, emancipation of women, emancipation of youth, and emancipation of poor people, so the socially and economically deprived. So these are, in my view, the main elements of nostalgia for Tito, that it's not some just pleasant cultural political memory of those times, but also kind of political weapon, if I might exaggerate, to criticize the present. Everything that you put on a wall illegally is already a political act. It simply shouldn't be there. So you take freedom that actually no one grants you, and just making something on the wall illegally is already a political act. How do I explain this? How do I explain this to students, the digital generation? I always say, before the internet, before the Facebook wall, there was another wall, the ugly, gray wall out there. You're interested in how the post-socialist condition in Yugoslavia reflects in graffiti and street art, of course, so post-socialist graffiti and street art are an agent and media of the cultural and political memory in our region. In post-socialist, I was doing, and I'm still doing, researches in different countries, all these 7 successor countries, and there are big differences between them. So, I don't have time to explain all of them, so I'll try to generalize, First, there are lots of references to the World War II and the Yugoslav period. So how now we can relate to what we were discussing before, so there's a lot of nostalgic and also anti-nostalgic graffiti and street art. So, but it's difficult to make to find out how exact number. It's practically impossible, But I would still say, that they are more pro than anti-Yugoslav graffiti and street art. So they are still more, praising Tito than hating Tito in a way, which in a way explains that for them, there's not enough Yugoslavia in present day, dominant discourses and institutions. So they try to balance up, the presence of Yugoslavia in public discourses. Then the second topic are the wars and the conflicts in ex-Yugoslavia from 1990 or 91 to 2001. A lot of graffiti battles, celebrating, condemning war heroes, victims, victories, defeats, massacres, and so on. So these wars, this very troubled period, bloody period, of the 90s, is still very much reflected, also in the walls of ex-Yugoslavia in different parts. Then the next group would be contemporary political struggles, reflecting what is going on today, 2010s, 2020s. There are street reactions to elections, political, economic crisis, unemployment, corruption, migrations, and so on. So everything that is going on today in all these levels is also present on the walls. You're mentioning football fans. Again, the biggest difference between the graffiti and street art of the football fans in the Balkans and in other parts of the Eastern Europe or Europe as a whole is that a lot of them are strongly politicized. So it's not just being a fan of one certain football club supporting them, but also, you know, there's a lot of ethnic, political, religious, and so on elements in them, you know, including genocide. So it's much more than just being a football fan. And not to end in a pessimist way, there's also a lot of emancipatory graffiti and street art criticizing the contemporary injustices from the progressive side. So not from the conservative side, not from the side of what we lost, but also of what we can achieve, you know. So in a way, I see political graffiti and street art as a litmus paper of the political, economic, social, cultural condition of a certain society.